Hi, my name is Eve. Recently, my students have been asking me, and especially beginner students, but this is relevant to anybody really. They've been asking me about sitting. What is the correct way to sit on the floor? And actually, it's quite an in-depth answer that I have to give because it really will depend on your body and on the tendencies in your body, on where you're tight, on where you're mobile, and supporting yourself to sit actively. So what I mean by that is when we're sitting on the floor, one of the benefits of not having a chair back there is we've got nothing to flop against. We can still slump on the floor, but we can more easily find a deeper strength. We can engage the core and sit with inner awareness. I would call it that, without needing to rely on props and things to hold us up, although the props are what we need in the beginning and maybe to just make us comfortable so that we can access the correct muscles. Because if we're not accessing the correct muscles, we actually have no support in sitting. We'll get tired quickly, we might get a sore back, we just won't find it comfortable. In the beginning, it's not easy. Sitting is something that you have to practice. You don't just suddenly get comfortable sitting. So it's okay in the beginning to do this sometimes and just lean back on your arms if that feels like a nice rest for you. Some people will feel they want to lean forward and put the hands in front of them. Either or, every now and then just give yourself a break. Otherwise, your muscles will get fatigued and exhausted. And I would say build up. So build up slowly, where you're doing just a short amount of sitting first of all, a few minutes, 1 or 2 minutes. You'll gradually build up to 5 minutes, maybe more if you are going to sit and meditate, or if you're going to sit and do a lot of breathing, then you would need to get used to sitting for longer. But that will build up over time once you've set the foundations for sitting actively and correctly. All right, so the first thing I want to look at is if you're not used to sitting on the floor at all, and something that happens to many people if you're a bit tight in the front of your hips, is that where the back wants to round, the shoulders want to round, and we want to close the front of the body. And it's really difficult if the teacher says to you, okay, bring your weight to the front of the pelvis. You just probably won't be able to do that. It will feel very limited. So you need to, in that case, use props. And for some people in the beginning, you might need a lot, like a very high block. So you might need something like that to help you. And can you see I'm sitting at the front of the block? If I'm on it, I could still end up slumping even though I'm up there. So coming to the front of the block so that the front part of my pelvis is off, and it's giving me a bit of a downward tilt, and that is bringing back the lower back curve, which would disappear if I'm doing that. So it's a good thing to have your lower back curve there, not too much, but just bringing back a natural curve. For some of you, that's going to feel too high. So then you would use maybe a cushion like this, or even a folded blanket. Experiment with different heights and see what makes you feel comfortable. For me, I used a block and I used a cushion for a long time until I reached a stage where I could more easily access my inner core and my deep abdominal muscles when I'm sitting on the ground. That's me personally, and that was after many years of practicing with supports. So just be aware that whatever supports you use, it might change. So something else to look at. So maybe that solves your problem and you're already feeling much more comfortable with that. In some cases, there's too much arching going on. And I see this a bit more with more experienced teachers or people who are quite flexible or even hypermobile. in that case, so I'm just imagine that's what I am, and I do tend to veer more in this direction. So a tendency here would be that, where I'm sitting, but I'm sitting with my back overarched. So again, I'm not in the natural curves of my spine because I'm pushing into my tummy. I'm compressing my back through too much arching, and that will eventually lead to discomfort in the lower back. And what also happens here is the rib cage tends to jut out. So you can see I'm kind of opening up here at the base of my ribs. So some teachers will just say, let your lower ribs streamline or bring the lower ribs in. I like to picture them, you're almost knitting the lower ribs into the abdominal area, or slide your hands down. I'll show you from the front. Slide your hands down and streamline the lower ribs into the abdominal area. So you haven't got a big gap underneath them. And you'll notice immediately when you do that, immediately there's a subtle engagement of your abdominal muscles. So people who are sitting all the time like that for years and years, yoga teachers, experienced yoga practitioners, you're not actually using your inner core at all. You're not really getting core support here. You're just doing a kind of an overarch, and you're going to find the strain goes to all different places. So I encourage you, if you do tend to push your weight right to the front of the pelvis, to start bringing it back. So that's in the case of, that's if it's your habit to arch and to throw your weight forward. Bring it back a bit. And maybe play with rocking. So here I'm rocking into the back of my sitting bones or the back of my pelvis. I can even feel my coccyx starts to touch the ground a bit. It's not comfortable there, so I'm not going to stay there, but I'm just aware that I could go forward and I can go back, and I can play with those two extremes. And you'll notice it's a pelvic tilt. So here I'm tilting my pelvis forward, big arch in the back, tilting the pelvis the other way, my back is rounded. Those are the main two habits that you could have. There's many others, but those are the main two that are relatively easily remedied with props and with awareness. So now if I'm a person who's tilting my pelvis forward, I need to bring more weight into the back of the pelvis. Just enough so I feel balanced, and you will sense it. If you do a bit of this, you will sense when you're in the middle, because in that place, instantly you feel a deep activation of your abdominals, and you feel your spine naturally wants to grow upwards towards the sky. And it just feels so much better to sit like that. For some of you, you won't need a block or a blanket or anything, and you'll benefit from the connection to the floor, which eventually happened with me, that I really like having that feedback from the ground and sitting on the floor, unless I'm planning to sit for a really long time. And then just letting your awareness come to your breath. And feeling, you can almost visualize it or meditate on it, that when you're sitting, when you are lengthening through the spine, it becomes more effortless, it becomes easier, and you breathe better because your rib cage is in a more comfortable position. You're not jutting it where the ribs feel awkward, and it can actually hinder your breathing. So there's space now at the back ribs, there's space in the side ribs, there's space in the front ribs. And you can breathe three-dimensionally when you're sitting comfortably. Close your eyes, just feeling the breath traveling in and out through your nose, moving into your rib cage area. And some of you will also notice the pelvic floor muscles naturally have this feeling of lifting as well. You're not pulling them up. You're not doing a Kegel. You're not lifting, engaging. Simply by putting your weight into the pelvis correctly, having the right orientation between the ribs and the pelvis, the right tilt of the pelvis, that natural engagement of your deep abdominals will happen, as well as a subtle awakening of your pelvic floor. So it's a huge amount happening when we're simply sitting. And it's like you open up this whole world when you start to tune into it and observe it. I love it. It gives me inspiration to sit and breathe. Because otherwise you can think, oh, sitting and breathing, it's a bit boring. But if you become more embodied in your sitting and breathing, it's just a process of discovery. There are other tips that I could give you about sitting. I'm not going to include it in this video, but if you do have any questions about particular issues affecting you when you sit, please put them in the comments below and I'll be happy to respond to them. And if you would like any more videos about other aspects of sitting, also let me know. And I hope you find a comfortable seat on the floor and enjoy sitting and breathing. Thank you.